Hey everyone, I'm James, and today in the SoulSync community we get to meet Sage. Sage, welcome. I guess
Thank
maybe tell us a bit about how you found yourself in the little internet cove of SoulSync and Soulbound tokens.
yeah, thanks for the intro, James. Yeah, I'm Sage. I'm one of the core contributors over at Keys. Um, we're an up and coming DAO focusing on using Soulbounds to guide our contribution based DAO. How I found myself into SoulSync, I met Mitch over at the Radical Exchange, which was a couple months ago now, and we've kept up conversation on some various channels. And then when this Telegram chat popped up, he sent me over the invite, and I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Nice. That's kind of how I ended up here as well. I've known Mitch for a while, and I think he's a good dude. They're up to some cool stuff, and I think that it's a really interesting space. Maybe it actually be good to learn a little bit about keys. I guess the intent here and the purpose of the chat right now is more to introduce you as like a person who's interested in soulbounds. But it sounds like there's some strong overlap with your keys and soulbound tokens. You mentioned gating. It'd be cool to sort of unpack that a little bit and maybe just explain sort of your view on like why soulbounds are important or what potential you think they have.
Yeah. So I guess like what brought me into my original discovery on Soulbounds. I mean, I was very active in the DAO scene around when Vitalik originally dropped his paper on it, and I mean, I got to reading, and I was originally immediately like, oh wow, this could be really impactful for what we have going on here, as we were considering, as I said earlier, like a contribution gated DAO, which like the thoughts behind that were. We don't really like where the financially traded governance is at right now. Like you come in and buy your way into our governance. So we thought that by creating a contribution gated DAO in which someone could come in, actually start participating and doing work and then earn their governance share like that would be a good way to turn away from that financially gated governance. And to make that happen, we would Soulbounds would play a big role into that. In you come in, you do your contributions, you earn the token or the rep that represents your contribution, and that then needs to be bound to yourself because you can't trade your contributions, your hard work with someone else. So that was my big dive into it. I would say like another big part of why I'm pretty bullish on it is Keys is focused on this new up and coming layer one called Luxo. And Luxo enables some smart contract based accounting rather than your standard EOAs. So they offer some more functionality for soulbound tokens like community recovery, the ability to reject or accept tokens, right? So instead of on the standard MetaMask EOA getting sent an SBT and then having it stuck to your wallet forever, you'd be able to reject it in the first place. Some functionality like that I was pretty familiar with, that I was like, oh man, there's these SPTs show a lot of promise, but there's some issues on right away. But this blockchain that we're so focused on might be able to bring some composure to those. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into SBTs. I think our DAO is really focused on the reputation, the identity side of the individual members that are focusing in our DAO. So SBTs can definitely play a big role in that.
That's wow. I mean, that's super cool. The when you say SPTs, you're talking about soulbound tokens. Just for whoever that needs to hear that. And I guess the idea of soulbounds as a foundation is they're non-transferable, right? And so I
Correct.
guess you mentioned community recovery. Do you want to sort of walk us through why that is needed? And I guess what you're thinking there, because I think that's probably one of the uh, it's a pretty foundational root problem kind of issue of the soul bounce. But I know that there's a lot happening. I just don't know exactly what's happening. And so if you've got some color there, I think that'd be neat.
Yeah. I mean, community recovery is like one of the more things I'm like more bullish on in the space right now. Like, I think one of the bigger issues is the single failure like private key system of like a standard EOA, right? Like you lose your private key, you now lose access to that wallet completely, right? And I think that there are some recovery systems, but being able to offer a recovery system based on like Now me and you, James, have had this interaction. I can add you into my wallet as a recovery option for someone that I've had an interaction with. I lose my access to my wallet. I can then have you and Mitch and some of the other people who I'm close with go and recover my wallet for me. And now I have access back into that account, which could be, I mean, rather than just losing my private key and losing access to all my stuff, that could be very valuable. On the Soulbound token, the non-transferable side of things, it comes into play with, like, say you wanted to rotate your keys for some reason, right? You felt like your private keys, your wallet was compromised, and you have all of these bound non-transferable tokens that are attached to that wallet. And if you're looking to rotate keys and move to a colder wallet, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do so. But using community recovery and some of those other social recovery options, you might be able to build in options where you can take those non-transferable tokens and use some sort of social recovery model to actually be able to transfer them into a new wallet and rotate them so that you can move them around when you need. So I think like situations that we might not have seen so far like that show real promise to providing some solutions to some of the issues around soulbounds right now.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think that was my first hurdle of Soulbounds, was just what happens if you need to move your if you need to move your what your security is, or you lose your access. And it's a tricky one, because if you enable it, then all of a sudden you've got markets trading Soulbounds.
Right.
But I think the community option, I think, is pretty interesting. And I guess when you said it out loud, you could now give me like a reference, like one of N people that can help you recover. And I guess in my head, I'd go probably on a call with you, and you'd say, yeah, I've messed up and left it in my wallet and dropped my wallet in the water. Like, I don't know. But I
Yeah.
guess how do you then maybe protect against, I know Mitch, I know you know Mitch. I might suspect that Mitch has one of like the abilities to sign for the movement of your wallet. Is it something that you would see where, like, you decide 5 of 15 need to sign? Like, is it something you think people would keep private, or would it be public? These people can sign for me, or I guess maybe it's just revealed at the time they sign it with a proof.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like to think that, like, so again, I'm like one non-technical. So again, I have like a very general grasp on a lot of these things, but with most of my background being on like Luxo's new up and coming tech, like with a smart contract based wallet, essentially you're just attaching a smart contract to the account, right? So you can program whatever knowledge you need into that. If you want like a multi-sig approval that needs 7 out of 10 people to be able to move something, and that makes it a safer process for you, then that's something you could enable. Versus, I mean, I would definitely advocate away from like one person being able to, obviously, or even like three, right? Because that could, if you and Mitch met up one day and you're like, hey, we want Sage's soul bounds right now you're transferring my assets out without me approving of it. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely options. I would definitely harp on the side of a multi-sig approval for sure.
Yeah. I guess it's not just Sage's soulbounds, it's Sage's identity.
Right.
I kind of think, you know, that's the direction things are going, and I think I mean, it's really playful, it's really interesting and fun to think about. Um, can you talk a little bit more, I guess, about the role you think soulbounds can play in identity? And you mentioned, there's a bit of an issue when you've got um, VCs maybe holding 2% of a token supply, but when it comes to the governance voting, because most people aren't participating, they end up with over sort of 20% of the vote, right? I think that's been a topic recently. It's like, is this something that you think should be done entirely instead, or is a hybrid, or sort of where are you at in that kind of mind space?
Yeah, so I mean, I think soul balance can play a great side into identity. I think there's definitely a give and take, right? Like, you don't want to bind information that gives away too much of the individual, right? Like, you have PII information that you have to be aware of, especially when you're putting these things on chain, right? If I were to put like a soulbound asset that says I live where I live on chain forever bound to this wallet. Like that's not ideal. But I think that like from a lot of this soft identity stuff of like what is my shirt size, right? Like little things like that that can make like me as an individual stick out, and I feel like I own my wallet and I'm building this actual identity on chain, but it's not something that I can give away anything that I think is too sensitive. So I think it can go a long way. I think the on-chain off-chain debate is big. I think one thing that really gets me intrigued is there's been this notion around like that you don't need to, like the non-transferable aspect that you hit on earlier, James, of like these don't necessarily need to be tokens. It's like the information attached that is the important part, right? And you can really play around with through smart contracts being able to attach that information actually just to a wallet or to an account to an individual identity without having a token attached, right? And through some ZKs, you could really like keep that information private if you would like versus public if not. Um, I think one of my bigger issues around Soulbounds that I haven't really been able to get around too much, especially in like our DAO, like the governance side of things. If people are like doing contributions and doing work to earn governance share in our DAO, right? The non-transferable aspect protects against like them selling their contributions and earning someone governance who didn't earn it. But it doesn't protect against like the selling of the entire account,
Yep.
right? Like if I wanted to take my entire account that has all these assets and give that key to someone, now those people can just essentially fake my identity. So I didn't actually have to transfer those assets out at any point, but someone can now forge what I have earned and they have not. So that is definitely something that I've been thinking about. And to hit on your last point of like the investment side of things, like a VC that is trying to invest in your DAO often just goes and buys your DAO token, right? And that DAO token is a financially tradable token that gets them governance offering most of the time. And I think that is like one thing I've been running into with Keys for sure is like, how do you create equity in the DAO when you have to actually earn it, right? If someone is coming to like give us a bunch of money, they can't just like buy a certain share of the DAO, right? It's a decentralized group, especially in something like mine where you have to earn your way in through contributions. Well, what does that equity look like when you can't do so? And I don't. That is still something I'm trying to figure out for sure.
Yeah, well, I guess like if it's got if the governance is for the voting, maybe you could assign the VC's wallet or the, investor's wallet and attribute value to them as a result of capital being a contribution. Like I know it's not contributing in the sense of problem solving and, you know, community building or whatever you're sort of working towards, but I guess capital is a contribution. But I think
Right.
like the root of the problem is not so much the capital or people wanting to sell it, it's people wanting to have like an overextension of influence when a DAO needs to be decentralized by definition, right? Otherwise, it's not doing what it says. Um, that's a tricky one, and it's tricky, I think, and I feel like there'll be people in the community here that probably have angles or views on this, right? That's kind of the intention of these calls as well. Like, so if you're
Oh
watching, like,
yeah.
I don't know where we're going to put the video, but we'll put it somewhere, and you can, jump in, share your thoughts. I think, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of these, really. Maybe I
Mhm.
guess you mentioned ZKs. I'm sure he'd get caught up there. I'm trying not to. If we step back a bit, I mean, uh, everything we've spoken about so far has been, I guess, the things that you're working on in the context of soulbounds and maybe the implications of soulbounds. But maybe zooming back a little bit more, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what your background is, how you got into the space, like the industry, and I guess the areas that interest you outside of crypto, like what things do you like as a person? What do you value? What are you looking to achieve? That kind of stuff. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure. So I got into, well, we'll start with the crypto background. I guess I started buying Ether 2018, right after my senior year of high school. Um, and I kind of just stuck around. I was listening to a lot of Bankless episodes. I was following along in that way as an investor, and then I kept progressing. The pandemic hit, and that's where I kind of found Luxo, and that made me dive into DAOs a little bit deeper. And then I was invited onto this team for Keys, and like finally getting into a group that I could put in some actual work really made me dive into the scene a little bit more. So I guess like I'm real deeply rooted in the DAO scene. SPTs is a big part of that for sure now in my experience. I think that my like for DAOs has come from I have this like background of throughout high school. I started this nonprofit, which was a community-based nonprofit in which people in my high school would come together in a group and be like, all right, we want to do these community initiatives throughout the week. All right, let's vote on which one we all want to do, and then we would go do it. And then the next week we would repeat the process. That was something I started my senior year, and then we kept repeating. And then I went to a small private college in Western Mass that was based on the humanics philosophy, which is spirit, mind, and body, and focus to others. Right. So a lot of community service throughout all of college. I started another few community service-based initiatives at school. And then that was all like leading me up to this then discovery of DAOs, which is like, I mean, community service, but like human coordination, like a community building on like a more global scale. And where I'm interested in this tech already, it was like a real big crossover between what I was naturally drawn towards in real life and where my investments were at the time. So I guess that has been the biggest crossover, I guess, from like my personal life outside of college. And so I graduated in May, so I'm freshly graduated, and now I've been kind of doing this stuff full time. Outside of that, I play a lot of sports. I played baseball all through college. So I'm big on watching sports, playing sports. I golf all the time, snowboard, pretty much anything to keep me active, get my mind off of this computer whenever I'm not doing this stuff is definitely helpful. But yeah, that's pretty much me.
That's great. I love that. What was like the motto of the college?
So it's a humanics-based philosophy. So it's spirit, mind, and body in service to others, right? So focusing on both my spirit, mind, and body, and then using that to both service other people in the community, right? Humanics-based philosophy.
That's nice. I think that's yeah, I'm gonna make a note of that. And I think we all should probably. Um, that's really cool. I think like you probably hit the nail on the head for why most people end up not just in crypto, but in these kind of areas of crypto, right? It's like the things kind of just click when you go, and everyone has different backgrounds and experiences, I think, but we're all kind of like, oh, this thing kind of solves for some of the problems that we see. Um, I think that's really neat, and I imagine that we'll find that'll be the common theme here. Um, I guess in regards to the ecosystem more broadly, we've got on the macro level, interest rates and inflation just obliterating markets right now, and there's this idea of risk on, risk off, and so until the macro sort of economy recovers a bit, people are seeing it hard to take interest in crypto. But I guess what's your thoughts on that? Maybe less from price side of things, but do you think that the appetite for building and innovation has slowed down at all from what you're seeing, or what do you think needs to happen for that to recover?
Yeah, I think naturally, like a little bit of the building has slowed down just because there's so much less money in the market, right? When there's so much money being thrown around everywhere, then building is going to speed up a little bit. I do think though, like that's one of my favorite parts about being around DAOs is it never feels like these people are stopping, right? Like when the motivation is outside of making money and the motivation is improving human coordination on these global scales and really improving what DAOs have to offer in the future of DAOs and all that. I think that really never stops, even depending on the markets. I think like I know. I mean, I won't talk price because I hate talking price, man. I've like my whole investment thesis has been buy ether and hold ether, right? I would love to be able to get to a grocery store one day and be able to spend that stuff without ever having to cash it out, right? So I pay very little attention to the markets aside from, I mean, just like what I need to keep up in my daily life. I think like as a founder right now that's trying to raise money, like I saw one of my favorite follows on Twitter is David Phelps, and he was like, what is the harder situation right now? Having raised a bunch of money in 2022 and having to re-raise now, or raising a lot of money early in 2023, or sorry, raising very little money in 2023 and having to make it last.
Mm.
um, I think it does a great job at fishing people out, right? Like as much as, again, like the DAO people are going to keep working and working and working, when you have people that are making these like random millionth variation NFT projects just to rug pull and make a bunch of money, when you have those guys kind of moving off and not being involved as much anymore, it makes more room for the people that are actually trying to create something that is positive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. The funding's harder to get, so it's going to where it's more earned, and the short-term quick win scammy type things or grifts, maybe they're not intentionally scams, but I think they're dropping off, right? Which is good to see. I'm sure we could probably talk a lot longer. I'm going to try and keep these little sessions little, and we'll probably do, yeah, I'm not sure what happens next. We'll put it up somewhere, we'll share it with the group over the next couple of days, and the conversation will evolve into whatever happens next. But it was really, really good chatting. Everyone else that's watching, I hope you learn some tricks, or if you've got any insight or angles, maybe solve some of the problems we talked about. Drop in, add it into the threads, make a thread, make a video, upload it, tag us, whatever. Like, let's explore. I think that's the whole point of this thing. Alrighty, thanks heaps. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, peace out.